we can go now to the second block of content. In this second block, we are going to discuss specific experiences of evaluation and certification of previous studies of refugees. Sadly, Marina Malcina can't attend this meeting, but we have Florian Gorkai from NOKUT. Florian works as an advisor in NOKUT section for interview-based procedures, and she has since 2014 worked with international cooperation in the education sector. First as international coordinator for Hedmark University College, and from 2015 for Lillehammer University College. He also has broad knowledge of project work in the field of international education. So, Florian, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much for the brief introduction. I'll just share my screen. I hope everyone can see the screen now. I believe it's visible now for everyone, and you can hear me clearly. Perfect. Hello once again, everyone. Thank you to all the speakers, and welcome to everyone who's participating in this event. And thank you once again for inviting us to this webinar. We gladly always participate when we're asked to share our experience from NOKUT. As it was mentioned, I work as an advisor for the interview-based procedures section here at NOKUT, which is the main section that assesses refugee qualifications. Before I go ahead and talk specifically about the procedures that we've implemented at NOKUT, I would like to say a couple of words about NOKUT. NOKUT is a Norwegian agency for quality assurance in education, or in Spanish, Organización Nacional para Calidad de la Educación. As you can hear, there is a lot of potential in terms of my Spanish language pronunciation, but I will get back to that later. In addition to being an organ for accreditation of Norwegian education, NOKUT also works with the recognition of foreign qualification. NOKUT's role is to contribute that the society has confidence in the quality of the Norwegian higher education. On your right side, you can see the organizational map of NOKUT. It consists of a board of directors and a chief executive to ensure NOKUT's independency. NOKUT also has 5 different departments and a department of foreign education, which has 4 different sections: section for information about foreign education, section for recognition of higher education, section for recognition of VET or vocational education and training, and TVET, technical and vocational education and training, as well as section for interview-based procedures. Why do we do this work? The short answer would be to fulfill our legal obligations towards the Lisbon Recognition Convention, Article 7. In addition to fulfilling our legal obligation, these means would also increase the life quality of refugees. It would empower them and also make the integration process more efficient. These procedures are, of course, not to replace the traditional integration process, but they are a vital tool for integrating refugees into the Norwegian society. Previously, before we implemented procedures in Norway, many of the refugees were required to go to retake their education or take several courses in order to gain access to the labor market, but also take courses in Norwegian universities. So Norway is one of the 55 countries that have already ratified the Lisbon Recognition Convention. As it was mentioned earlier today, there will always be challenges when it comes to forced migration. Just a couple of years ago, the number of refugees was at about 60 million people. It has today increased to 89 million people. In many cases, the individuals coming do not have documentation of their qualification, were not able to finish their qualification, or their institutions and archives do not exist any longer, which makes it impossible to also verify the documents, or simply the documents are non-verifiable because of the system, because how the system is built in the country where they come from. Challenges to develop recognition and admission schemes targeting specific aspects of migration are and have been fair and transparent recognition procedures, ensure that applicants are not discriminated by the system, and ensure the demand for mobility and portability of that education. This means in practice that if someone applies to a procedure in one country, the document that they're issued can be used in different institutions or in the labor market, as well as outside of the country borders. These were a couple of words on the background for the work that we do. I will now go and talk a little bit more about the procedures itself that we have implemented here at NOKUT. The traditional document-based recognition has existed for a while, but as you know, a lot of people would not qualify for the document-based recognition. That's why we have at NOKUT 2 different interview-based procedures. One of them is UVD. In Norwegian, UVD stands for uten verifiserbar dokumentasjon, or non-verifiable documentation. And the second procedure is NOKUT's qualifications passport for refugees, and the short name for NOKUT's qualifications passport for refugees is qualification assessment. A little bit of history background when it comes to implementing and also developing these procedures. The work with refugee qualifications started already in 2005. There have been several initiatives between 2005 and 2012 in recognizing refugee qualifications. The initiatives did not function satisfactorily in relation to the intentions, in particular with regard to equal treatment of the applicant, quality assurance of the assessment process, status of the final document, uncertainty surrounding the premises for expert assessment, and pressure of time at higher education institutions. So when the first initiatives were started, the main responsibility for assessing the application has been at the university institutions in Norway. We did experience differences in both the capacity to process these applications. So not all institutions were able to implement procedures, but also the general knowledge of the educational background of the refugee. And also practically just coordinating that has been very difficult. In addition to that, the end product, the document that the refugee will receive would vary very much from person to person, which also meant that the document could not necessarily be used in other institutions, but also the labor market. So the refugee that would apply for recognition at an institution was very much bound to that one institution. In 2011, a pilot project started, initiated and completed on commission from the Norwegian Ministry of Education and Research, and established by NOKUT as a national recognition scheme in 2013. This meant that all responsibilities, both the practical and the whole framework around the procedures for recognizing refugee qualifications, were moved over to NOKUT. And this is the procedure that we still use today, the UVD procedure. After 2013, the methodology developed throughout the years until 2013, and also the changes after 2013, have led to NOKUT's involvement in several national and international projects. For instance, parts of the method, the UVD method, are used in a program called Students at Risk, which gives admission to international students that are, for instance, fleeing persecution in a country, and gives them admission into the Norwegian higher education system. We've been involved and contributed in the EQPR project. In 2016, NOKUT launched the pilot project in NOKUT's qualifications passport for refugees, which is now called qualifications assessment. I will talk about that a little bit later. And we've been again involved in testing of the EQPR in several countries, testing of NOKUT's methodology in some countries, as well as UNESCO's qualifications passport. Back to the procedures that we have implemented at NOKUT. The main differences between UVD and qualifications assessment would be that UVD is a legally binding document, whereas the qualifications assessment is not a legally binding document. So a person, when they apply for general recognition, if they do not fulfill the criteria for general recognition, they are sent over to the UVD procedure. Every applicant needs to fulfill some criteria to apply for the UVD procedure. The person needs to speak English or any Scandinavian language, needs to have a refugee status or permanent residency, and the applicant has to have completed their education. The cases when applicants are sent over to the UVD procedure from the general recognition is when some documents are missing, documents are not verifiable, the applicant does not consent for us to contact their institution, and the reason why they would not consent varies very often, but in many cases it's usually due to political and security reasons, or there is an identity discrepancy. So these are some of the reasons when applicants go through the UVD procedures, and some of the requirements, or the main requirements for the UVD procedure. Not every applicant does fulfill these criteria. So an applicant will automatically be forwarded or given a qualifications assessment if they have not completed their degree, they do not fulfill the language requirement, and does not have a permanent residence permit or a refugee status in Norway. The qualifications assessment is very similar to the EQPR document. There's a general statement about the refugee's background, both in terms of education, but also professional work experience, as well as an advisory statement on what the refugee can do to improve their qualifications, and information that the refugee may later on apply for an UVD assessment or a general document-based assessment. We also do have a video that we use for promoting the qualifications assessment, which is called NOKUT's qualifications passport for refugee in this case. I would like to show you. Please let me know if you cannot hear the voice in the video.
Refugees often go through a long and strenuous journey before they can use their qualifications. Important documents such as passports and diplomas may be lost before arriving in a new country. Even if their papers are missing, refugees still possess valuable competencies. Education can be key in creating a new life. It can help someone earn a decent living, and it can mean being better prepared if a return to one's home country is possible. The Qualifications Passport for Refugees is both a document and an international framework. It assesses and maps the educational background and competencies of refugees, as far as it is possible under the circumstances. The methodology is developed by NOKUT and is carried out in 3 steps. The candidate presents all available documentation. The candidate does an evaluation of his or her education. Finally, the candidate goes through an interview with 2 experienced credential evaluators. The evaluators are experts on the recognition of education and have thorough knowledge of the local conditions. The goal is to evaluate and map the candidate's educational level and work experience. This information is then gathered into one document, the qualifications passport. In this way, the candidate receives a standardized document describing the studies completed and at which educational level. Language competencies and relevant work experience are also included. The result is a credible document that will help the candidate apply for jobs or further studies. The benefits of a system that works at an international level are many. Not only will it help refugees use their education to create a new life, it is also an essential integration tool. A qualifications passport will make it easier to understand and benefit from the education and competencies of refugees. The qualifications passport can also be employed across national borders. So far, the Council of Europe has implemented the methodology as the European Qualifications Passport for Refugees, while UNESCO is establishing a global qualifications passport. Increased migration across national borders also means the migration of competencies. With a qualifications passport, refugees without written documentation of their qualifications can participate in an increasingly globalized society. They can discover the value of their own competencies and make an active contribution in their new homelands.
So the reason why we have two procedures, I think it's very important to mention, is due to the Syrian refugee influx in 2015. All of a sudden, we had many refugees applying for asylum in Norway, and we saw that many of them did not necessarily fulfill the criteria for the UVD procedure. For instance, language requirements, the criteria for a permit and so on. So it was necessary to establish a procedure that was more flexible and that would enable their access to the Norwegian labor market and higher education. This said, when the pilot project started in 2016, NOKUT worked very closely with both higher education institutions and different organizations to ensure that the information that we're including in the qualifications assessment document is relevant information that both the labor market and higher education institutions would need. I would like to say a couple of words on the different stages that the applicant has to go, or how the framework is set here at NOKUT. Every applicant needs to apply digitally through NOKUT's application portal. To simplify the application process, we don't ask an applicant to specify themselves what they are applying for. They actually do apply for general recognition, which is document-based. A case officer will look at the case and send the application over to the interview-based section here at NOKUT, and then we would invite the applicant to the interview-based process or the UVD process. Once the applicant has accepted the offer, we will then send a 16-page long questionnaire where we ask the candidate to reconstruct their education. We also check their language proficiency in English or Norwegian, as well as their identity and residential status. In step 3, upon receiving the questionnaire, we will then do a level placement where we compare the candidate's education with the Norwegian education. Bear in mind that we compare the educational structure and the educational system. For instance, what is a 4-year bachelor's degree from Iraq compared to the Norwegian education system? At this stage, we also conduct the preliminary interview with the candidate. And the interview is conducted by 2 case officers, where one of the case officers is the main responsible person for asking the question, and the other one is responsible for writing a report. So there is a triangulation of information at this stage. We both do a background check based on the information that we know about the country, about the institutions, and the information that we have on our database. the information gathered through the questionnaire, the supplementary questions throughout the interview, and all of this is provided to an assessment to the expert committee, which is appointed by NOKUT. In stage 4, the reason why we have an expert committee interview in addition to the interview with credential evaluators, it is to substantiate the completion of education by the candidate. The expert committee is already informed very well about the candidate, as we do provide the answers from the survey, the report from the interview, and NOKUT's general evaluation of the education. The framework of interview conduction by the expert committee is set by NOKUT, and it is pretty much standardized for each candidate. The interview the interview has 2 different parts. One of them is the written part, where the candidate is given an assignment based on their curriculum, which they need to answer and send in right before the interview, which also is the basis for the conversation, at least at the beginning of the interview. After the interview is done, it usually lasts for around 1.5 hours. The expert committee has to write a report and send that to case officers at NOKUT. The expert committee is also chosen by NOKUT. It is usually professors with the same or similar academic background, and we also try to choose professors from different institutions. For instance, if the candidate or if the applicant has applied to get their degree in French language recognized, there will of course be a professor in French linguistics, and maybe also a professor with a background in educational sciences. Once the report has been sent to NOKUT, NOKUT uses that report from the expert committee as basis for a legally binding decision. Once the candidate has received this document, they have a recognition of their education, which is on the same level as normal or usual document-based recognition. Then we go over to the qualification assessment. This is just to, again, show the differences between the UVD procedure and the qualification assessment. The whole process is very, very similar, except for that the qualification assessment does not consist of an expert committee, and we do not issue a legally binding document. Often when the applicant has applied to NOKUT, we can early on see that this is going to be a qualifications assessment and not necessarily a UVD. For instance, if we see that they do not speak English or any Scandinavian language at B1 level, if they do not have the residence permit that they need, and so on. And sometimes we discover that an applicant will get the qualifications assessment during the interview. The qualifications assessment document is very similar to the EQPR document. There is personal information about the candidate, information about the highest reached level of education, professional experience, when they did study and also when they did work, in addition to an advisory section where we basically recommend the candidate on possible pathways, what they need to do, for instance, to get a job, or what they need to do to get admission into a university, or if there is any chance to later on apply for a UVD or document-based procedures. It is also stated on the lower part of the document. This is an example of an applicant that has applied to get their bachelor's degree in English language recognized here at NOKUT. They will apply through the digital portal, then they will be referred to the UVD procedure. If the candidate accepts the offer to participate in the UVD procedure, the questionnaire will be sent to the candidate. The candidate will have a couple of days to answer that questionnaire. Then the credential evaluator will check if the candidate fulfills all of NOKUT's requirements for residential permit, language skills. The case officer will conduct the preliminary interview with the candidate and usually ask a question about the missing informations and try to fill the gap. In the case of this candidate who applied from Afghanistan, the candidate has all of its documentation from the degree, but we are not able to verify their background. We check if the institution that they applied from was accredited at the point when the candidate finished the degree. We check the scope of the study. And we also do check if the candidate has an extensive working experience. And we do, of course, also ask questions about that during the interview. In this case, the candidate has studied English language. What is important to note when it comes to language degrees, this is the only exception where the candidate does not fulfill the criteria of speaking English or Norwegian. Let's say this was a French degree. The whole interview with the expert committee will be conducted in French. There will be a French professor and someone with educational science background. If we do not have any documents at all from an applicant, we use international databases for accreditation to get information about their background. We search in our own database. We search in our archives for similar education. We contact partners if the applicant is from a country that we do not have much experience on, and we use our in-house library. The centralization of these procedures has allowed us to collect a very big database, which has also made the processing of applications much easier throughout the years. The evaluation by the expert committee is very much set. As I mentioned, the framework for the interview and the expectations, they are very much standardized. The expert committee has clearly is supposed to outline if the candidate has fulfilled their education or not. When the expert committee sends the assignment, the candidate will always have around 1 month to answer the assignment. This means that even if we can set up an interview much earlier, we're not allowed to do that because every candidate has to have 1 month to answer the written assignment. And the expert committee has to clearly outline if they believe that the candidate has the educational background that they claim to have. To summarize both the procedures, they are to some extent very, very similar, except for that the qualifications assessment does not have the fourth stage of expert committee, and it is not legally binding, whereas the UVD procedure is a legally binding one. Thank you very, very much for your attention. And I'm very happy to answer your questions if you do have any.
Thank you very much, Florian. Okay, Kaisa asks 2 questions. The first one, how long does the process for general academic recognition typically take? That was also my question. And the second one, why has Norway opted to have a national process alongside the European qualifications passport?
Very good question. Thank you very much. The process does actually not take a long time. Usually most applicants have gotten an answer or decision within 3 months. And in some cases, these applications are processed faster than the general recognition applications. But since the whole process is very standardized and regulated, we can, for example, not make it shorter than 3 months, because the candidate is supposed to have a month to prepare for the assignments and so on. And plus, they have around 10 days to answer the UVD invitation after they receive it from NOKUT. And the second question was, I think partially because Norway implemented these procedures very early. The UVD procedure came before the UQPR in 2013, and the methods used in both EQPR and UQP are based to a large extent in the methodology that is used in Norway.
Thank you, Florian. Parniyan Ahmadi says that me and my family, we have acceptance of asylum, I think, and our tia, he's talking about the Spanish identity card for foreigners is in process. Unfortunately, I don't have any documents of my school, but I have some document of my university. Can I be participant in Spanish university? Well, this is not now part of the topic we are discussing right now, but you can write to an address I'm going to send you on private, and we can discuss about this question. Kaisa says that thank you for the clear presentation. I would like to ask you, Florian, what are the main challenges of NOKUT's methodology?
I guess the same challenges that everyone has working with this kind of recognition. The level placement is always very hard. Our recognition says something about the scope and what kind of education it is, but we are not able to level place candidates, which makes it in some cases hard for them to get admission into higher education. Secondly, in Norway, the admission process for bachelor's degrees is centralized, which means that it's not the universities that do process the application. It is a centralized body that does that. So I still think there is some potential. There is some work that we need to do when it comes to a level placement of candidates and how we can solve that in the future. I think that will enable them even more to get access into institutions, but also the labor market.
And how do you reach out the target?
I mentioned briefly, we have a promotional video that we send to all public bodies in Norway. The institutions that are responsible for integration of refugees are informed about it. We work closely with the municipalities. We work very closely with the labor market in Norway, as well as the general information on recognition procedures that is sent yearly to all higher education institutions. In order for our procedures to work, we're very much dependent that everyone is informed about it. So we make sure that everyone applies, but also to increase awareness and increase the trust of these procedures by the general public.
Thank you. Are there more questions from the participants? No?
I have a question. During the time that refugee students or refugee people are waiting for the answer of the evaluation, NOKUT give some time of support to them?
What are you referring to support? Are you referring to the UVD or the qualifications assessment?
Yes, for example, to obtain the requirement that they need to be accepted in a university, or only NOKUT give do only evaluation?
Yeah, well, when refugees receive the qualifications assessment, The paper does generally state what kind of educational background they have, as well as their professional background. But the last part of the document is an advisory statement of what they need to do to get admission, like possible pathways, or to get into the labor market, or if they want to get a legally binding recognition of their document, which steps they need to take in the future. We have included this because we want to make sure that the document is as useful as possible for the applicant, not only including a statement that they can attach if they are applying for a degree or if they are applying for a job, but also an advisory statement that is useful for them personally and for the steps that they can take. So it has sort of a dual purpose, the qualifications assessment, whereas the UVD, it is a official, legally binding document that clearly states that this person has this education, and it is pretty much the same as any other legally binding recognition that we do have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if there are not more questions, we can move on. Thank you very much, Florian, for your speech. It has been very, very interesting. And I think that at least we are like catching some ideas, and maybe you will receive some emails for more information.
Please do.
Okay, thank you very much.